nitrous oxide cylinders set off in tents and improvised structures seem to be the thing of choice. So rather than the little capsules, they're quite big, solid aluminium capsules that get left behind. I've done a bit of work on that to ascertain whether they're safe to transport and recycle. Yes, they are. But the overdose risk is a lot higher with those, because you're actually entering a structure and not needing to administer yourself, so you can get in quite a state with it. So that's where I've been up to for a year, and things. Some of the interventions that would be suitable in more parks, etc. I don't have the luxury of, on the grounds that I'm on my own, and I would be at significant risk on some occasions. A lot of the fly tipping relates to people who are involved in the drugs trade and organised crime. So yeah, it's a bit like the Wild West at the minute. I've come looking for the magic bullet, and I don't think I'm going to find it. So yeah, that's where I'm at with it. But what I found really interesting was the 50% of people who believe that, 1 in 10 who believe that if they need a bin, it should be close by, which is something that I've come across regularly. When bins are provided, they're always in the wrong place. Then they're set fire to, vandalised, all the wildlife gets into them. So yeah, it's a bit of an issue.
Thank you for that, Lee. We're just waiting on James coming in to the chat because he's chairing this room. But just I'm not sure really where everybody went there. But I'm just wondering, like, what's other people's views on some of the presentations then that were done this morning there? If anybody's got any questions or thoughts on it.
Hello. Yeah, I found it really, really interesting. I think messaging is one of the big things. So there was a conversation I was involved in the meeting chat and talking about the countryside code and dog waste, and the countryside code says any bin will do. But because we've changed how we're handling our waste and more of it's more general waste bins being sorted, which is brilliant because they divert so much from landfill. So that's amazing. But if there's too much dog poo in there, they won't then sort it. So it's like there's a bit, yeah, that any bin will do, stick and flick. Yeah, dog poo bins only. And I suppose that's it's a bit more kind of nuanced and complicated with dog waste than perhaps, well, I think recycling actually can be quite complicated, can't it? Like different councils, like Tetra Packs. What on earth do you do with a Tetra Pak? Some places do, some places don't. Some places you've got to sort everything into different bins, others you throw it all into the same bin. So I think it's some consistency across the board would be amazing. But yeah, thought they were really good presentations. So
I think one thing that I find, certainly, just I'm a dog owner myself, but when you go out into the forest, the dog bins already seem to be full and there's like nowhere else to put them, you know. So a lot of people, I don't know, seem to think that they can't take it home with them, you know. So it's trying to think of different options and different things that people can do. And I don't know if anybody's got any great ideas on that kind of side of stuff or tried anything.
It's difficult. I'm a ranger across some countryside sites, and part of my job is to empty some of our dog bins, and they get filled up with general litter, and then it means they can't be used for dog waste, and that just gets left on the floor. We don't have bins on our site, like a lot of countryside sites don't, and a lot of nature reserve don't, but people expect bins, and I think that stat was really interesting, that people expect to have bins. We're actually going to be installing a bin in our car park, and it's the first time we've had that, because we want one place that people could bring their rubbish to if they wanted to. But I think generally what we find is that the people that are going to litter regardless if there's a bin. And I think we need to have a behavioural change at school and younger, because that's the really hard ones to tackle. It's the ones that are going to do it anyway. And thinking about Bournemouth, I know Bournemouth Beach was all over the news last year. There are so many bins on the beach, on the seafront, and they weren't being used, or they were being used by some but not others. People just get up and leave it. So I think it's an entrenched behavioural change that's needed. They're providing more bins this year on the seafront. I think there's going to be bin city down there, so I don't know if it's going to make a difference, but we'll see if it does.
I guess like you're saying, part of it is about the messaging, you know, how you do you start in schools, or, you know, do you do more campaigns to adults, and sort of what message you're trying to get across to people. And I think it's interesting hearing some of the research that's been done there as to, you know, what people's views were, you know, and how some people thought that somebody was going to come and pick up their litter after them in the Lake District, which is kind of like, why, you know? So I think there's kind of two sides to that. Yes, starting with schools, but obviously adults need to realise that there's not staff walking around the Lake District mountains picking up rubbish after people, you know, or any other site, you know, or well, there's not enough staff doing that kind of, you know, work or anything like that. So it's trying to think about different ways to instill those messages to people in a very simple way. Has anybody done any marketing campaigns or anything like that have been very successful in this group?
One of the things that we've been doing, picking up on the dog bin thing, years ago, we stopped using dog bins for those very reasons. Okay. And instruction was it went into general waste and then it would be sorted out. So this goes back 8 or 9 years. At that point, we had a lot more money for vegetation management, etc. But what I've been doing just recently is what I've targeted is entrances and mowing big bell mouths, because the general behaviour of people is that you walk into the place, you let your dog off your lead and you look in the other direction and then you haven't seen it. And so you don't have to pick it up. And that might well be by a bin or wherever, which is where the bins are situated. And I'm thinking of one particular site where I've got the most of my general littering problem is. So by cutting back the bramble, cutting back the vegetation and maintaining a nice wide bell mouth, we get less dog fouling on the path, which negates the stick and flick and this and that and the other. And I've had to just accept people's behaviour in that area, unable to challenge it directly. Posters don't work. We walk past posters and we get too many waggy finger posters, and it's the automatic response. By the time they've arrived at the site, their behaviour is set. They know what they're going to do. So we
have a lot of our posters ripped down.
Yeah, they object to them. There's a big sort of push at the moment. People are just angry about stuff, and when they come to somewhere, they don't want to be told. They don't want any more rules, and they don't want to comply and stuff. So their behaviour is set before they arrive, and it's all generations. It's not just. I found it with younger people. I found it with older people. And I'm afraid in the UK, there's a culture of dog ownership that you don't get elsewhere. A couple of years ago, I spent a long time in Poland. And when I came back, I realised that all the entrances to all of my sites smell of dog urine. And they didn't in Poland because the dog ownership is a lot lower. And that, so we've got a culture of dog ownership, and people abdicate the responsibility, and an increase has started again in professional dog walkers who don't contribute, who use the site, and there's no way that you can clean up adequately and supervise 6, 7, 8 dogs at a time. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing vehicles turning up and people operating a business by emptying other people's dogs on our sites. And they don't seem to want to contribute and are unlicensed, because we just haven't got the resource to manage it and things. So getting to people before they arrive and addressing the dog owner culture, I think, is and people go to the kennel club, but the kennel club doesn't recognise, doesn't represent many of the dog owning public. Only represents a very, very small minority of people who are breeding and showing. and stuff. So it's unrealistic to expect that from the dog press and the kennel club. They've got a big job to do anyway, but I don't know where we go with that. It's who do we engage with that engages with all of these dog owners? It certainly isn't within my resource.
It's a big challenge, I think, definitely, you know, certainly with the amount of people that are purchasing dogs over the last year and a half, it seems to have gone crazy. But I think maybe in that area, if you're saying like posters don't really work and sometimes having the bins don't work either, in your experience then of managing sites and stuff, what do you think? Is there kind of two different levels you could go down? Could you go down what other stuff could you try at the site, and then what could you do before people come to the site?
On site, it's about adapting the impact and looking for your hot spots, and then seeing what you can do with the land management in that area. Okay, we're going through blips at the moment. Dogs are less likely to be off the leads than they've ever been because of dog theft, and that seems to have motivated behaviour change. We've had periods where there's been very, very strict enforcement in some local areas, which displaces then the behaviour to new areas. And I was thrown, bags of dog waste were thrown at me once because they thought I was about to issue a fine and stuff, which I wasn't. And I found a smiley face and a conversation helps. However, you have to pick your time, because usually you get a very, very short answer, and being about at those entrances and being seen to be managing the place makes a difference, and there's only a certain amount of resource you can dedicate to that. Being a smiley face helps a lot, and things, and then you can get a difficult message across to people. Okay.
Thank you for that. I see, Lisa, you've got your hand up. Did you want to ask a question?
Yeah, it just follows on a little bit from what the last speaker was saying about, I think engagement is the key thing, face-to-face engagement. As you say, a smiley face, you're not threatening, you're not going to enforce. I have no powers of enforcement anyway, I can only ask politely. But it's time, it's resources, it's the fact that there's 50 other things that need doing and you can't spend all day on one site. That's the problem we have. I think engagement works, but it needs to be funded, and that's beyond my my control, really. So
do you think maybe with some of the research that was done there in the Lake District and stuff, you know, would that be enough for the powers to put more funding towards, you know, environmental sites where there's large numbers of people coming up?
Yeah, I think possibly it would. I mean, there's been a massive amount of money has gone into Bournemouth as a result of last summer, but most of it's at the seafront, and I don't work on the seafront. But yeah, I think it's been very targeted in those areas. So there has been extra funding found. I don't know where they found the funding from, but yeah, I think all of that research does help. It does help. I don't know. I'd have to find out who I'd need to send it to. I don't know if they've got access to it, but.
No, I'm just trying to think about, you know, sometimes marketing campaigns do help, you know, to get the messages across to people in terms of not just on social media, but I do think there's a lot of people that I work with anyway that are older, maybe aren't on social media, so doing stuff maybe on radio or ads on TV and stuff like that, and but it's being quite direct on your messaging. You know, I think for some people, some messages about saving the environment and climate change are maybe too vague for some people. It might be a specific thing like take your litter home with you, don't leave it in the forest, you know. So I don't know, you know, do councils, have you ever been involved with councils like doing, or organisations doing marketing campaigns to message to people?